I told myself it would be cold, mechanical. That I would close my eyes, let it happen, and walk away. But I was wrong. Because the moment his lips touched my skin, something shifted. It wasn't cold. It wasn't mechanical. It was fire. He knew exactly what to do, exactly how to touch me, exactly how to make me forget everything except him. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt before. I whispered, "Come inside me," subconsciously. The best feeling ever. Let me pause for a second. If you've made it this far, you are clearly intrigued. This is just the beginning of this explosive tale. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Trust me, it gets more interesting. Let's go back to how it all began. Mike and I had been married for 7 years, and for most of those years, we were happy. We weren't rich, but we had each other. We had dreams. But dreams don't pay the bills. And when Mike lost his job 2 years ago, everything changed. I watched the man I loved crumble under the weight of rejection after rejection. It wasn't for lack of trying. He applied everywhere, swallowed his pride, took interviews for positions far below his skill level. But nothing stuck. Our savings dried up faster than I expected. Rent notices started piling up. The fridge sat empty more often than it should. Some nights, we ate just once a day. We were sinking, and I was terrified. I worked, of course, but my job as a receptionist at a small firm barely covered anything. I could see it in Mike's eyes, the shame of not being able to provide. He hated that I had to pick up the slack. He started retreating into himself. I didn't know how much longer we could survive. Then, I met him. The first time I saw Ethan Collins, he barely noticed me. I was just another face in the company where I worked, a billionaire CEO visiting for a meeting. He walked into the office like he owned the world, because, in a way, he did. Tall, powerful, completely untouchable. But the second time, he noticed me. And from that moment, everything changed. He came back a week later for another meeting. This time, when he walked past the front desk, his eyes lingered. He gave me a look that made my stomach tighten. A small smile played on his lips. It was dangerous. Intoxicating. And then, just like that, he was gone. The next day, I got called into my boss's office. I thought I was getting fired. Instead, I was handed a business card. "Mr. Collins requested to see you personally." He left his number. I should have ignored it. I should have thrown it away. But desperation is a strange thing. It makes you ignore red flags. And so, I called him. We met at an expensive restaurant, one I could never afford on my salary. I was nervous, sitting across from him, watching the way he studied me. He didn't waste time. "I've seen you struggle," he said. "I know your husband lost his job." I flinched. How did he know? He continued, his voice calm, confident. "I can help. I have a position at my company that Mike is more than qualified for. A 6-figure salary. Stability. All you have to do is say yes." It sounded too good to be true. And it was. Because then, he leaned closer, his voice lower, and said the words that would change my life forever. "But I don't give out favors for free, Anne. You know what I want in return." My stomach dropped. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an expectation. I stared at him, my pulse racing. This was a test. I could walk away right now, pretend this conversation never happened. Tell Mike about the job offer, but not how it was really obtained. Or I could stay. And let this man take something from me in exchange for saving us. "Think about it," he said, finishing his drink. "But not for too long. Then he left me there, my hands shaking, my mind spiraling. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to Mike, listening to his slow, steady breathing. His arms were wrapped around me, holding me close, trusting me. I thought about our life together. The nights we spent dreaming about the future. The love we built over the years. And then I thought about our empty bank account. The unpaid bills. The way his eyes looked duller every day. Could I do this? Could I sleep with another man, for money? For Mike? By morning, I had my answer. I met Mr. Collins at a hotel. The moment I walked in, I felt sick. Everything inside me screamed that this was wrong. That I should run. But then I thought of Mike. I thought of the job that would change his life. I thought of the future I was about to secure for us. So, I stayed. And I let Mr. Collins undress me. I told myself it would be cold. Mechanical. That I would close my eyes, let it happen, and walk away. But I was wrong. Because the moment his lips touched my skin, something shifted. It wasn't cold. It wasn't mechanical. It was fire. He knew exactly what to do, exactly how to touch me, exactly how to make me forget everything except him. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt before. Not with Mike. Not with anyone. And that terrified me. When it was over, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that it was just one night. That I would walk away and never look back. Mr. Collins lit a cigarette, watching me with a knowing smirk. "You'll be back," he said. I shook my head. This was a one-time thing. He laughed. No, it wasn't. He handed me an envelope full of cash. And then he whispered the words that made my stomach twist. "The job offer is still on the table. Tell your husband to expect a call." I walked out of that hotel room, feeling like the worst person in the world. I told myself I did it for Mike. For us. But deep down, I knew the truth. I did it for me too. Because for the first time in my life, I had tasted power. And I wasn't sure I could stop. Guilt should have eaten me alive. But it didn't. Not the way I expected it to. Instead, something else took root inside me, something dark, something thrilling. It wasn't just about Mike anymore. It wasn't just about money. It was about him. About how he made me feel. And that was the real sin. The morning after it happened, I woke up next to Mike. He was still asleep, his face peaceful, his hand resting on my hip like it always did. Like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had betrayed him. And yet, as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I wasn't crying. I wasn't breaking apart inside like I had imagined. Because there was something else stirring in me, something I didn't want to name. It wasn't just relief that my husband was finally going to get a job. It was the memory of last night, of how Mr. Collins made me feel. The way he held me. The way he owned me. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the thoughts away. This was over. It had to be. Later that afternoon, Mike got the call. I was in the kitchen when I heard his voice, sharp, disbelieving, then excited. When he hung up, he turned to me, eyes brighter than they had been in years. "Baby, I got the job." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the way my stomach twisted. "That's amazing." He pulled me into his arms, spinning me around like we had just won the lottery. "You won't believe this, it's with Collins Enterprises. You remember I applied months ago? They said the CEO himself recommended me." The room spun. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Mike didn't notice. He was too happy. Too grateful. He kissed me, whispered, "This changes everything, Anne. We're going to be okay." And in that moment, I knew I should feel victorious. Instead, all I felt was trapped. Because I wasn't just indebted to Mr. Collins. I was bound to him. I tried to move on. I tried to convince myself that one night didn't define me. That I could lock the memory away, pretend it never happened. But the thing about temptation? It doesn't just knock once. It keeps calling. And I answered. The first time, I told myself it was just to thank him. A quick meeting, nothing more. But the moment I stepped into his office, I knew I was lying to myself. He was sitting behind his massive desk, power dripping off him like perfume. He smirked when he saw me, like he knew exactly what was going through my mind. "Mike started today," he said casually, leaning back. "He's doing well." I swallowed hard. I just wanted to say thank you." He stood up, walking towards me slowly. "Is that really why you came, Anne?" My breath hitched. I should have turned and left. I should have walked out of that office and never looked back. Instead, I let him touch me. Let him tilt my chin up, his thumb grazing my lips. I didn't fight it when he kissed me. And when he pressed me against his desk, his hands pulling at my clothes, I didn't stop him. Because I didn't want to. That day, something snapped inside me. It was no longer about owing him. It was about wanting him. And that terrified me more than anything else. The meetings became more frequent. The excuses became easier to make. Mike would leave for work in the morning, excited about his new career, telling me he was doing it for us. And I would run straight into Mr. Collins' arms. I told myself I could control it. That I could have this, and still go home and be the perfect wife. But I was lying to myself. Because I wasn't in control anymore. He was. Mike noticed the first change a week later. "You're different lately," he said one evening as we lay in bed. "Happier." I forced a laugh. "That's a good thing, right?" "Of course," he murmured, tracing circles on my arm. "It just feels like... I don't know. Like you're carrying a secret." My body stiffened. He was too close to the truth. So, for the first time in our marriage, I lied to him. "I'm just relieved that we're finally stable," I said, turning to kiss him. "That's all." And just like that, the deception began. As weeks passed, I began living two lives. By day, I was Mike's devoted wife, smiling, cooking dinner, listening to him talk about his new job. By night, I was Mr. Collins' mistress, moaning his name, letting him take me in ways I never thought possible. I knew I was walking a dangerous line. That sooner or later, something would break. But I wasn't ready to stop. Because what started as a transaction had become an obsession. And I was losing myself in it. It started small. A necklace. Then a designer handbag. Then a weekend trip he insisted I take with some girlfriends, but of course, it was really with him. I didn't want to accept the gifts at first. But then I realized. I wanted them. I wanted the thrill, the feeling of being desired, the rush of knowing I was being spoiled in ways Mike could never afford. I told myself that as long as I kept my heart out of it, I wasn't really betraying my marriage. But deep down, I knew I was lying. Because with each passing day, I was thinking about Mike less and less. And thinking about him more and more. The first time I truly understood that I was in too deep was the night I came home late. Mike was waiting for me, his arms crossed, worry written all over his face. "Where were you?" I froze. If this had happened months ago, I would have panicked. I would have broken down, confessed, begged for forgiveness. But instead, I lied. Without blinking. Without guilt. "Just out with some friends," I said smoothly, slipping out of my heels. "Nothing serious." And that was the moment I realized I was no longer the woman I used to be. Because I didn't even feel bad about it. By now, lying had become second nature. It started small. A white lie here, a fabricated detail there. I was with the girls. I stayed late at work. The office needed me for an emergency. Mike believed me. Why wouldn't he? I had never given him a reason to doubt me before. But then the gifts started piling up. The designer bags. The expensive dresses. The weekend getaways that left me glowing in a way Mike couldn't explain. And slowly, his blind trust started to fade. "And where's all this stuff coming from?" he asked one evening, picking up a new gold necklace I had carelessly left on the dresser. I swallowed, my mind racing for an excuse. "Oh, this?" I laughed, brushing it off. "It's fake. Just a cheap little thing I found at the market." Mike frowned. "It doesn't look fake." I turned and kissed him before he could ask anything else. A distraction. A delay. It worked. But I knew the walls were closing in. And I wasn't ready for what would happen when they finally collapsed. One afternoon, while lying in Mr. Collins' bed, my phone rang. I almost ignored it, until I saw Mike's name flash on the screen. My heart stopped. Guilt surged through me like a lightning bolt. I quickly sat up, breathless, shaking as I answered. "Hey, babe," I said, forcing my voice to be normal. Casual. "Where are you?" I glanced over at Mr. Collins, who was lying beside me, watching me with a knowing smirk. I turned away. At work," I lied smoothly. "Just finishing up some last-minute things." "Why?" Mike sighed. "I just wanted to hear your voice. You've been different lately." My stomach twisted. But before I could respond, Mr. Collins leaned in and kissed my neck, soft, slow, possessive. I shuddered, my breath hitching. Mike heard it. "Anne?" I snapped back to reality. I am here." I stammered. "Sorry, just dropped my pen." A beat of silence. "Okay," Mike said finally. "Come home soon, okay? I miss you." Guilt slammed into me. "I miss you too," I whispered. Then I hung up the phone, and let Mr. Collins take me again. Because no matter how guilty I felt, I couldn't stop. Mr. Collins didn't just want my body anymore. He wanted me. Completely. "You're mine," and he told me one night, his voice dangerously soft. "Not just in this room. Everywhere. Always." I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the intensity of his words. But I knew he wasn't joking. He was possessive. And obsessed. When I missed one of our scheduled meetings, he showed up outside my house. I panicked, rushing outside before Mike could see him. "What the hell are you doing here?" I hissed, my pulse racing. Mr. Collins smirked. "You've been avoiding me." "I was with my husband," I snapped. "You know, the man I still love?" His expression darkened. "You think this is just sex?" I stiffened. "Your husband can have your words, Anne. Your promises. But I own your body." His hand slid around my waist, pulling me too close, his breath warm against my skin. And the worst part? He was right. I wasn't just cheating anymore. I was choosing him. Over and over again. Mike wasn't stupid. I could see it in the way he watched me. The way his smile faded when I came home late. The way he reached for me in bed, only to find me cold. Distant. One night, as we lay in the dark, he finally said it. "And, are you seeing someone else?" My heart stopped. I turned to him, forcing myself to look him in the eye. "What?" Of course not. I forced out a laugh. How could you even think that? Mike's jaw clenched. Because I know you, he said softly. And you're not the same woman I married. His words stung. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I wasn't the same woman anymore. And I wasn't sure if I ever could be again. I should have ended it that night. I should have confessed, begged for forgiveness, walked away from Mr. Collins forever. But I didn't. Instead, I kissed Mike. Let him love me. Let him believe I was still his. And the next day? I was back in Mr. Collins' arms. Because no matter how much I tried to fight it, the fire inside me was too strong. And it was burning everything in its path. Secrets are like fire. You think you can control them, keep them burning in a small, hidden place. But sooner or later, they spread. They consume. And before you know it, you're standing in the middle of the wreckage, wondering how you let it get this far. The night everything fell apart, I was lying in bed next to Mike, pretending to be asleep. But inside, my mind was racing. I had just come from Mr. Collins' penthouse. My skin still smelled like him. My body was still tingling from his touch. And my husband was sleeping peacefully beside me. I turned to look at him, guilt twisting like a knife in my stomach. How much longer could I keep this up? How much longer before I slipped? Before he found out? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning, I was in the shower when I heard Mike's voice, sharp, cold, unfamiliar. Anne. What the hell is this? My stomach dropped. I turned off the water and stepped out, wrapping a towel around myself. When I walked into the bedroom, Mike was standing there, holding my phone. Holding an open text message. A message from Mr. Collins. Last night was unforgettable. I want you again. Same place, same time. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the moment my world shattered. Who the fuck is Mr. Collins? Mike's voice was shaking, his knuckles white as he gripped my phone. I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my heart hammering in my chest. He took a step closer. Answer me, Anne. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because what was there to say? That I had been lying to him for months. That I had been giving my body to another man while he worked tirelessly at the job I had bought for him with my betrayal? That I had fallen for someone else? Tears burned in my eyes. Mike, His laughter was bitter, broken. Oh my God, he whispered. It's true. You've been cheating on me. I reached for him, desperate, pleading. It's not what you think. Not what I think. His voice cracked, full of pain. Then tell me, Anne. Tell me what the fuck this is. I had nothing. No excuses. No lies left to tell. Only the truth. So I gave it to him. All of it. How it started. Why I did it. The job offer. The first time. The passion. The obsession. By the time I was done, Mike was shaking. His face was twisted with something beyond pain. Disgust. Betrayal. Hatred. You didn't do this for me, he said finally, his voice empty. You did this for yourself. And he was right. Mike left that night. Didn't pack a bag. Didn't take his things. Just walked out the door. I sat in the silence of our apartment, my heart aching. I had destroyed him. Destroyed us. For what? For a man who didn't love me. For a fantasy. For a fire that burned too hot and left nothing but ashes. The next day, I went to see Mr. Collins. I needed answers. Closure. I stormed into his office, my hands trembling. It's over. He leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. I figured. I swallowed hard. You don't care, do you? He smirked. What did you think this was, Anne? Love? His words hit me like a slap. You used me. My voice cracked. And you used me. He shrugged. That was the deal. I gave you money. I gave your husband a job. You gave me your body. That's how these things work. I felt sick. Did it mean nothing to you? I whispered. For the first time, his expression softened. It meant what it meant, he said simply. And now it's over. I walked out of his office feeling empty. I had lost everything. My husband. My dignity. Myself. Mike didn't come back. A week later, he filed for divorce. I couldn't blame him. I had broken him. I had destroyed the life we built together for a man who saw me as nothing more than a distraction. And in the end, I had no one to blame but myself. Because some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some mistakes can't be undone. And sometimes, the thing you chase so desperately is the very thing that ruins you.